Chapter 205. That's what I said. This big brother is even more ruthless than my dad. He won't let anyone sell candy to that pretty big brother. It's so scary. Pretty big brother is so pitiful to be his baby. Yeah, so pitiful. The little radishes nodded in unison. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that she was about to explode. Wuxia took the candy, supported herself with one hand, and jumped in. Her movements were very handsome. She stood there with her long legs and winked at one of the little girls. She bent down and whispered, "Let me tell you a secret. That big brother was drunk. I did all this to make him happy. By the way, look at me, I'm so big. How do I look like his baby?" Drunk. The little radishes gathered together again and looked at Almighty Qin, who was standing outside the shop, as if they were looking at an inhuman being. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. He didn't hear Wuxia's words, but he knew it was the youngster's doing. He reached out his left hand and dragged the youngster back. That shop assistant watched with her mouth wide open. She was amazed by the silver-haired youngster's skills. So cool. Was he really not a criminal police officer? You don't even let kids off. Qin Mo's voice was very cold. What a flirtatious guy. Wuxia agreed. Brother Mo, don't you think those little radishes are very cute? Qin Mo didn't say anything. He just turned his handsome face sideways and took the youngster to the third floor. Wuxia thought at first that the Almighty finally took her to a more normal floor. The second floor was filled with children's clothing. The third floor was very modern, with all kinds of big brands. But why did the Almighty choose CK of all places? It was all underwear and it hurt her eyes. Go pick two. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows at Wuxia, looking very indifferent. Wuxia. She was a girl. Why would she buy men's underwear? I don't need this. Wuxia raised the candy in her hand handsomely. I'm fine with these rewards. If Almighty Qin could accept rejection, he wouldn't be called Almighty Qin. Go pick. Don't always make yourself look soft and white. Wuxia. Was the Almighty attacking her inner self instead of her grades? What's wrong with white? Wuxia thought that this was a great color, and it should be loved by a germaphobe like the Almighty. Qin Mo glanced sideways, glancing at the youngster. From a psychological point of view, the one at the bottom would like to wear white. Wuxia. In such a situation, the shop assistant was still hesitating whether or not to interrupt. Qin Mo had already raised his slender and fair fingers, pointing at a pair of pure black underwear hanging on the far right. That style, I want one. With that said, he turned sideways and glanced between Wuxia's legs, curling his thin lips into a mocking smile. Give him the smallest size. Yes, sir. The shop assistant felt that the conversation was back to normal and quickly turned around to pack the packaging. Wuxia felt that the way the Almighty looked at her was filled with humiliation towards humanity. I'm medium. The shop assistant paused and turned around, only to see the young man gently smiling at her. Sorry to trouble you. Give me a medium size. This. The shop assistant didn't know who to listen to. Qin Mo's expression was indifferent. He didn't say much. Seeing this, the shop assistant naturally sided with the youngster. All right. Please wait a moment. Chapter 206. Qin Mo stood there, tall and slender, letting the young man tease his ear. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, exuding an air of abstinence and indifference. Instead, it was the two girls standing outside who blushed. They really wanted to take pictures of these two handsome guys with their arms around each other's shoulders. Especially the scene of the young man standing on his tiptoes and curling his lips into a smile beside the man's ear. It was so pleasing to the eye that it made people's hearts beat faster. But just as they were about to raise their phones, the man suddenly made a move. He directly grabbed the young man's wrist and pressed him against the fitting room. His tall figure was pressed down, and his waist was elongated. His voice was cold and deep. You want to prove that you're not small? Go in and take off your pants. Big brother will measure it for you. She didn't even have one, so how could she measure it? Wuxia suddenly felt that she was in a dangerous situation. How could she forget that Almighty Qin was drunk today, so she couldn't flirt with him casually? Brother Mo, I was wrong. At this moment, she had to retreat in order to advance. I shouldn't have blown air into your ear. Mo raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man's slightly depressed face. Finally, he let go of his hand and said coldly, "Good that you know." The shop assistant softly said, "Sir, the underwear has been wrapped for you. Is there anything else you two would like?" Same style. Large size. When Mo said this, he looked in Fu Jiu's direction again with faint mockery. It was as if he was saying, "Do you think you're not small when you're wearing a medium size?" Fu Jiu understood that expression. It was a little unnatural, which made her subconsciously want to look at a certain part of the Almighty's body. It was really a little embarrassing. Fu Jiu hid something in her heart, so when the Almighty asked her what else she wanted, she casually pointed at a strangely shaped underwear. When did CK have something like this? And it had a pure black cat tail? Mo also noticed the underwear the young man was pointing at. His eyes paused for a moment, and he said faintly, "I really didn't know that you liked this kind of stuff. But I can't buy it for you. You're still in puberty, and it's not good for your body to wear too tight, not to mention this kind." At this point, Mo frowned as if he was thinking of an adjective. After thinking for a long time, he finally followed his heart. The shop assistant smiled and covered her mouth, as if she was trying to restrain her respect for the customer. This time, Fu Jiu was really depressed. Shopping with the Almighty had caused her reputation to go down the drain. She had just casually pointed at him. However, the shop assistant didn't seem to think so. When she handed him the shopping bag, she lowered her voice and said gently, "I understand, handsome. Next time, you can secretly buy it yourself. Since you're so handsome, I'll give you a 10% discount." Fu Jiu. She really didn't want such a discount. She originally thought that she would be depressed all the way with the Almighty, but unexpectedly, the Almighty suddenly changed his attitude. He pointed at a pure white sweater and asked Fu Jiu to try it on. Fu Jiu also thought that the sweater was pretty good. It was almost winter, and it was more important to wear warm clothes, so she didn't reject it. The fitting room was, of course, locked. With her previous experience, Fu Jiu was very insightful in this regard. Chapter 207. The workmanship and material of the sweater were very exquisite. Just by looking at it, it looked very soft. Not to mention the feeling of wearing it, it felt warm and comfortable. That pure snow-like color might be ruined if worn by someone else. But on Fu Jiu, it only made the young man's snow-white skin and dark eyes look good. In addition to that silver hair and the black ear stud on her porcelain white left ear, she looked up and smiled, and the female shop assistant was stunned. So handsome. As for how handsome she was and how much Fu Jiu suited the color white, people who hadn't seen it wouldn't know. It was as if she was born to be a clothes hanger. Even if it was a Korean version, it wouldn't drag on her. The sweater didn't have a collar, and it showed off her fair collarbones. But Fu Jiu had that devilish bloodthirsty coolness about her, and it made people's hearts beat wildly when they saw it. Mo, who was sitting on the sofa, heard the sound and looked over. When he saw the young man who was tidying his hair with his left hand, his deep eyes couldn't help but sink. Then, he stood up and walked over to Fu Jiu. His slender fingers moved, and he smoothed the young man's fluffy silver hair. Fu Jiu looked up, and their eyes met. She smiled at Mo, and it was as bright as the first melting of winter snow. That kind of warmth could be felt even on her fingertips. Mo curled up the corner of his lips, and the girls next to him held their faces one by one like they were infatuated. How can someone be so handsome? A handsome couple. Did you see that? When that handsome guy tidied up the silver-haired young man's hair, my heart almost melted. His smile was so gentle, completely different from before. Don't say any more, my health bar is almost empty. The female shop assistant had been in the shop for a long time, and she had good eyesight. Seeing the man like this, she immediately said, "Actually, we have a bigger size for this sweater. It's very suitable for two brothers to wear together. Sir, would you like to buy one?" Hearing that, Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. He remembered his conversation with Boss Lee before. The rebellious young man always liked to get more attention. Although he didn't consider wearing a brother outfit, it was still a good way to get closer to him. Okay. Hearing this word, Fu Jiu was somewhat surprised. After all, a person like the Almighty usually wore a suit or a uniform of dark colors. She didn't expect him to accept white? The sweater that Qin Mo wore was completely different from Fu Jiu's. Even though they both looked handsome, Almighty Qin made people feel cold and noble, and the unique design of the wide sleeves made him look like a vampire aristocrat. One slap on the face was enough to make women go crazy. But when the young man was standing beside him, the girls couldn't help but get rid of that thought. Chapter 208. Of course, Qin Mo also noticed Secretary Liang's gaze, so he glanced at him indifferently. That gaze was extremely cold. Secretary Liang shivered and swallowed the question in his mouth with difficulty. He looked at the shining white sweater in the rearview mirror. There would be an esports interview later. If CEO Qin appeared in front of everyone in this outfit, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. After all, CEO Qin had never dressed like this in front of others. After walking around for so long, Fu Jiu was already hungry. Qin Mo heard the young man's stomach rumble, so he asked someone to buy a bunch of food and threw them all into the young man's arms. Which one do you want to eat? Pick one. Fu Jiu was not a picky eater, and she loved meat the most. She took a bite of the chicken burger from Burger King. Burgers paired with Coke were the best. Fu Jiu's handsome face puffed up as she ate. Qin Mo frowned. Secretary Liang thought that CEO Qin would teach the young man not to eat in the car and to eat at home. After all, CEO Qin was a clean freak, and everyone in Jiang City knew about it. To his surprise, CEO Qin didn't say anything. Instead, he picked up a tissue and wiped the young man's mouth with disgust. Go to the Fu house first. Yes, young master. The driver heard Qin Mo's order and turned the car around. Fu Jiu lifted the corner of her eyes and glanced at the man who was still working on documents. She thought that the Almighty hadn't eaten since just now, so she took out a French fry and put it on his lips. Qin Mo didn't eat this kind of junk food, but the young man was in his rebellious phase, so it was best not to reject him. He opened his mouth and took a bite. It tasted good, so he let the young man do whatever he wanted. Secretary Liang felt like he had been hit the hardest the whole time, until he sent the young man home. His CEO was still warning in a low voice, with his deep and charming eyes. Stop flirting with people. Take a day off. The esports competition is the day after tomorrow. I'll be on the top floor of the Qin group. Get the uniform and wait for you. Yes. This was the first time Fu Jiu responded to Qin Mo. Not for anything else but because she felt that it was a very exciting thing to be teammates with a god. Secretary Liang didn't understand. He couldn't help but look back thinking, CEO, you don't look like you're teaching your brother. After the Hummer drove away, Fu Jiu walked towards the villa. He Honghua sat at home and didn't know about Fu Jiu's results. She glanced at the registration on the website again, but in her heart, she was thinking that if it really didn't work out, she would voluntarily withdraw from the competition. He Honghua was very clear about their grades. They could barely pass the rest of the exams, but they only scored a little more than 10 points in physics. She had never been to school and did not know what physics was. Chapter 209. First in the whole grade. He Honghua's face was full of indescribable shock. At that moment, she even suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. The phone was still ringing. Hello? Ms. He? Are you still there? Ms. He? He Honghua came back to her senses and asked hesitantly, how many Fu Jius are there in number 1 middle school? Teacher, did you call the wrong number? How could that be? The teacher chuckled. There is only one Fu Jiu in the whole school, and this is his home phone number. He Honghua couldn't hold back her excitement. You mean my Joe really got first in the exam? Of course it's true. The results will be announced in the form of posters in the whole school tomorrow. The most important thing now is his application for the competition. This kind of extracurricular competition usually requires the consent of the parents. I called you this time mainly to talk to Ms. He about this. I agree. He Honghua's face was red, and she was so happy that even her tone changed. As long as the school doesn't have any problems, I will agree with whatever my Jiu does. The teacher knew that He Honghua spoiled her children, but she didn't know who spread this rumor to demonize Fu Jiu's mother. In their eyes, He Honghua became an unreasonable country girl. Not only was she uncultured, but she also thought that whatever their son did was right. This time, after a short phone call, The teacher realized that He Honghua wasn't what she thought she was. Although this middle-aged woman wasn't cultured, she wasn't arrogant. Instead, she was very polite. Even if she spoiled her children, it was only under the school's permission. And who wouldn't spoil a child like Fu Jiu? The teacher was also a mother. She was watching the previous interview when she called. Fu Jiu's short words made her realize that this young man deserved to be spoiled by anyone. Fu Jiu pushed the door open and saw He Honghua's happy face. It was said that women were no different from children when they got older. This was especially true after He Honghua got close to her Jiu. After seeing Fu Jiu, she circled around Fu Jiu like a little girl. "Jiu, I got a call from your school. The teacher praised you for a long time and said that I was good at teaching children." "Dear Mrs. He, you've always been good at teaching children." Fu Jiu pulled He Honghua over and sat down with a smile. "Otherwise, how did I get such an excellent product?" He Honghua heard this and smiled even sweeter. "Yeah, that was the logic." Chen Xiaodong, who had just walked in, didn't know what was going on. He saw that his young master was coaxing his wife like a girlfriend. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why did he always feel that after he woke up from the hospital, he became more and more like a monster? The exam papers had just been handed out today. Could it be that young master didn't do well on the exam, so he gave madam a warning in advance? Chen Xiaodong thought to himself, even if young master doesn't do well in the exam, it doesn't matter. If young master can be as sensible as he is now, I will follow young master for a lifetime. Chapter 210. Fu Jiu sat on the sofa, still wearing her school uniform. She casually put one hand on the back of the sofa, looking devilishly handsome from head to toe. "Who told you that I was worried about my mom knowing about my results?" Chen Xiaodong's eyes lit up when he heard that. "Did young master advance by 1 rank? That's great." "What do you mean advance by 1 rank? He Honghua walked over with a round face. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. "Our Joe got first place in the whole grade." "First? In the whole grade?" Chen Xiaodong was petrified. The first place in the whole grade who got full marks in all 5 subjects was their young master. What on earth did young master eat to become so powerful all of a sudden? Could it be because of young master Qin? It was said that the power of love was great. He didn't believe it before, but now that he saw his young master, he believed everything. That young master who didn't even know how to touch a computer now locked himself in his bedroom and played games all day. Not only that, but there were also physics exercises. When did young master study so obediently? All these changes were because of young master Qin. For the sake of madam's happiness, he would keep this secret to himself. But He Honghua wasn't worried about this. Instead, she asked, "Joe, I saw the registration on the website system. Where did your team come from? Do they all know how to play games?" "Of course." Fu Jiu chuckled. "Mom, leave the competition to me. Just stay at home and rest." He Honghua thought that her Jiu's definition of how to play games was different from hers. She was talking about a professional. Even if he wasn't a professional, he would at least be a god. But as long as Jiu was happy, she could do whatever she wanted. He Honghua's biggest wish was to make her child happy, no matter what. At this moment, in a big hotel in the west of Jiang City, Fu Zhongyi specially held a small cocktail party to promote Fu Ximing. Other than the Fu family's business partners and school leaders, there were also Fu Ximing's friends from other teams. So naturally, the media would come after hearing the news. "Young Master Fu, I heard that you are very confident about this esports selection contest?" When the reporter was interviewing, he had a smile on his face. It was obvious that he was here to support Fu Ximing. Fu Ximing was wearing a pure white suit. His small face had a unique arrogance. "Of course I believe in my strength, and I believe in the strength of our team even more. The esports selection contest is just a beginner's competition. Of course we will win. I believe that," the reporter said passionately. This time, the Fu Corporation has recruited quite a number of almighties into the team. Even young Master Fu himself is a famous almighty in the game. As for who it is, I can't say yet. But overall, this is definitely an esports competition worth looking forward to. This was the industry. Apart from having some ability, one also needed to know how to package and create hype. Under his mother's influence, Fu Ximing had learned how to behave. Fu Zhongyi, on the other hand, looked at his proud youngest son and couldn't help but be delighted. When he received the guests, his face was full of smiles. The leaders of No. 1 Middle School also walked over. Chapter 2:11. The school leader gave Fu Zhongyi enough face and said with a smile, "Boss Fu, you really know how to educate your child. The results this time are so good that it's shocking. The school wanted to hold a parent-teacher conference, but we cancelled it because we were afraid that it would affect the students' studies. But Boss Fu, sometimes you should really go to the school and tell them how you raised your child." Fu Zhongyi heard that and thought that the school leader was praising his youngest son. His face became even more proud, but he still said modestly, "You flatter me. Ximing has been sensible since he was young. Whether it's in games or studies, he has never let me down. This child is so capable that even I, as his father, have benefited from it." Who knew that when the school leader heard this, he froze in an instant. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Well, Boss Fu, I was talking about your eldest son Fu Jiu." Him. Fu Zhongyi's expression was blank for a moment. After all, he never expected that the other party would bring up that useless loser. When Fu Ximing heard the name Fu Jiu, he wanted to skin the other party's bones. He stood there and laughed arrogantly. "So the director is talking about my big brother? Looks like my big brother is finally a little more sensible this time. He knows how to study. If the director is praising him like this, his results must be pretty good. He is in the bottom 20? The results will be announced tomorrow. But your big brother is much better than you think." The director's expression changed when he talked about Fu Jiu. "I've never seen such a smart student. He got full marks in all 5 subjects. I was the supervisor when he took the English exam, and he handed it in less than an hour. That English essay was so beautiful. As the top student in the whole grade, except for young Master Qin, he didn't surpass anyone else. Boss Fu, your eldest son is too low-key. Otherwise, he would have definitely become a popular figure in school. Even my daughter, who is in junior high, is crazy about him. She asks me to take her to see the latest school hunk every day. I don't know where these kids found this picture, but they said that they should look up to His Highness Jiu in the future. Not only must they be handsome, but they must also have a good character. Speaking of which, my daughter really became a lot more sensible after that. Is this the legendary power of idols? Ha ha ha. Ha ha." The director was a straightforward person. He laughed out loud at the end, and he didn't notice that Fu Zhongyi and Fu Ximing's faces turned green after hearing his words. Especially Fu Ximing. He clenched his fists, and his fingertips dug into his palms. He was clenching his fists tightly. The director's words really made him feel like someone had slapped him in the face. It was burning and embarrassing. Top student in the grade? That trash? How could it be? What power of idols? He knew better than anyone else what kind of a freak that was. He was a man himself, but when he saw someone taller and stronger than him, he couldn't move his eyes away. He would throw money around and show off his wealth. What right did such a good-for-nothing have to be a popular figure in the school? Fu Ximing narrowed his eyes. After the esports competition was over and King destroyed He Honghua's stupid company, he would come back and teach that blind piece of trash a lesson. The next day, as soon as the poster was announced, all the students in No. 1 Middle School gathered around. Chapter 2:12. These people were a little pretentious. He always felt that if he excelled in his studies, he would look down on this and that. He even felt that he was very righteous. No matter how good Fu Jiu was or how handsome she was, if she didn't have good grades, they would still be against her. His expression was one of, "I just don't like you." Nobody actually cared whether they liked it or not. Everything was because they thought they were very important, so even when looking at the results, they would put on an arrogant face. After they saw their own results, they looked at the last place, so that they could find another chance to mock those who liked Fu Jiu. But he couldn't find it. They counted from the back to the front, but they couldn't find the name that they thought would appear. Instead, when he raised his head, the most eye-catching thing was the youth's photo. That group of people's expressions changed. This year, the first place in the whole grade had an unbelievable result, and they had all heard about it from their teachers. But they didn't expect that the unbelievable person was actually Fu Jiu. The Fujio that they thought was trash. In an instant, this news blew up in the school hunk selection thread. Who said that our Highness Joe only has looks? Look at this score. Holy sh*t, how did you get full marks in your English test? What an amazing score. Number 1 middle school is really amazing. On the campus forum, there were not only students from the same school, but also students from other schools. Those who liked Fujio were proud that His Highness Joe had received more praises. However, there were still people who sneered. This kind of results might have been copied. What's there to be proud of? He still doesn't know anything. If I were to say that the school hunk should be Almighty Chin. Have you all forgotten about Almighty Chin? Almighty Chin is no longer on campus. At least find someone like Almighty Chin. What's so special about this Fujio? Compared to Almighty Chin, it was like heaven and earth. To the one above, please don't compare the two. I like Almighty Chin too. I believe that with Almighty Chin's character, he wouldn't want to see anyone step on another person when they like him. Hee, step on? Is Fujio worth stepping on? You even deleted my comment? It's useless even if I delete it. What I said is the truth. A gay wants to be the school hunk? Those who like Fujio are all crazy. If you ask me, only Fu Shiming from our class deserves the title of the new school hunk. Do you know how awesome he is? Not to mention his exam results, he was a god-level character in Hero. Like Almighty Chin, he was a professional player. On the list of the esports selection contest this time, he was the captain of the team. Just the number of god-level players under him was uncountable. Only this kind of person is worthy of being the school hunk, okay? It's just that he's more low-key, unlike your Highness Joe, who just got a little better in the exam and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yao came to find Fujio today because she wanted His Highness Joe to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Shiming, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Joe, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fujio chuckled and continued, "Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest." It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now she not only found it, but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Joe was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, "No." This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Joe and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way? The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fujio taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, but he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player, that was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. "Boss?" "Hi, boss. What are you doing? Give me a Coke." Yin Wuyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual. And I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." "Damn. So early. I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious." Yin Wuyao flicked the cigarette butt. "What are you talking about? Brats, pack up and get ready to close. Are you really going to close the door? No, boss, uncle. Where are you planning to go? Aren't you going to open the internet cafe? Wuxiao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league. Wuxiao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league. Could the boss be joking? At his age, it's unlikely. It was too cold outside the internet cafe. Wuxiao started to regret running out on impulse. He wasn't young anymore. In the words of a child, his hand speed and eyesight had long since fallen behind in a professional team. Why was a 30-year-old uncle still jumping around? However, his body couldn't help but reignite that hot blood in his body. Chapter 2:14. This reminded Wuxiao of the earliest times when he played hero. At that time, many people who played games were not understood. It wasn't like now, where a great god would be sought after by everyone. In the past 6 years, in the eyes of most people, anyone who had anything to do with computers was a loafer. Esports would always be rejected in China. Therefore, whether it was his relatives or classmates, the first thing they saw when they mentioned that he worked in the game industry was subtle disdain. Playing games can also earn money? Spending money is more like it. Such a person is a glutton and lazy person. He won't have much success in the future. Wuxiao sat on the railing outside the internet cafe, cocking his head and lighting a cigarette. Even he himself did not understand why he would think of something so long ago today. How many people say, he is not practical? He gritted his teeth and persevered. He thought that one day, he would prove to everyone that what he was doing was called esports and not just a game. Finally, he entered a pro team. He thought that he could finally shine. However, in just half a year. In the short span of half a year, all of his passion for this industry had been obliterated. It turned out that you didn't have to play the game well to make a name for yourself. How to promote, whether or not your agent will support you, the competition between people in the same industry, and the betrayal of your closest comrades in order to steal fans. Wuxiao stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. Just as he was about to enter, his phone screen lit up. It was a message from their temporary team's WeChat group. 999 brand lollipop. Can't you all sleep? Come out. I have gifts for you. What a child, a high school student. Wuxiao snorted, but his lips curled into a smile. With a cigarette in his mouth, he put on his hat and ran towards the address that the youth had sent to the group. There weren't many cars on the road at night. Especially in the north-like river town, the colder it was, the fewer people there were. However, for some reason, his chest and palms were burning hot. Feng Shang put on his coat and left. Shui Yaoyao also left at the same time. It was as if no matter how dark or cold it was outside, at that moment, even their eyes were bright. And what attracted them was the young man standing in the empty square of Chang'an Street. That tall and slender, his back straight and straight, wearing a black leather jacket and short silver hair, he leaned against a pure black Land Rover. After 11 o'clock in the evening, there were not so many cars on Chang'an Street. Therefore, even the sound of breathing while running could be heard clearly. Shui Yaoyao took the last train while Feng Shang drove and Wuxiao took a taxi. The three of them came from the north, south and east respectively. He didn't know if it was because he was running too fast, or because of the figure that emitted light even under the night sky. His heart was beating so fast that it felt a little tight. That kind of feeling didn't only occur when one was in love or missing someone. And it was now that they saw their companions and smiled at each other. Fujiu smiled as well. She walked over from the other side and raised her hand. The trunk and car lights were turned on at the same time. Under the dazzling light, all the rose petals that were pressed against the back of the car gushed out, just like a scene from a comic. Both Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang were stunned when they saw this. It seemed to be the most beautiful scene they had ever seen. Chapter 2:15. Team Uniform. Shui Yaoyao never thought that His Highness Jiu would give them this as a gift. When she turned her head to look, even the handsome Uncle Wuxiao's eyes changed when he saw the uniform in his hands. Needless to say, Feng Shang's fingers trembled when he touched the fabric in his hands. He had seen too many players trained by his brother. Every time he watched a professional league match, He would think that those people were so handsome when they sat in front of the computer in their uniforms, typing on the keyboard and waving the mouse. If he didn't stutter, his life might not be like this. But it was inevitable that he felt inferior. In fact, before he met his idol, he was afraid to communicate with others. When Feng Shang thought of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the smiling young man with his hands in his trouser pockets. Fu Jiu looked back at him. She raised her hand and put on the uniform that belonged to her. The quality of the uniform was very good, and it was obviously custom-made. The smooth lines slid down the shoulders, and with that handsome and fair face, she looked cool and noble. Shui Yaoyao and Yin Wu Yao looked at each other and pulled up the zipper. 4 people of different heights, all wearing the same uniform, stood in the middle of the square. Their feet stepped on the car lights, and the rose petals didn't fall for a long time. The next day, all kinds of news about the selection contest swept across the internet. Even if there was no news, there was still some news. After all, this was the most anticipated competition for everyone who played Hero. People who didn't play games wouldn't understand what it meant to change from a non-professional player to a professional player. What's more, the person standing on the top floor waiting for the new contestants was none other than the most valuable professional player in the esports world, Qin Mo. Just hearing his name could make people's blood boil. Not to mention that almighty Qin would be on camera the whole time. In the words of the media, this was the era of all-stars. The popularity of a professional team was no less than that of some actors, and it could even create an extraordinary amount of discussion. One of the live streaming platforms had already broken 10 million online users in the morning. Each of them had their own team that they supported, and the big clubs had sent out messages in advance about who would participate in the competition. On this day, the internet cafe was unusually quiet. Everyone was holding a beer or Coke, looking up at the big screen in front of them. The tickets for the selection contest had been on sale since a week ago, and the price was getting more and more expensive day by day. Until today, there were still people who wanted to buy tickets. The reason why these people were like this was because they were all waiting for the same scene, the members of the various battle teams entering the arena. Chapter 2:16. Bang! Lights gathered. Everyone sitting in the audience stand stood up and looked at the home court. 12 teams entered the arena. 4 people for one team. There were a total of 48. There were both men and women in the team. The women were usually very young, and their average age was no more than 92 years old. And the tougher the character in the game, the sweeter the character was, the sweeter the player was. This was the contrast of cuteness that the star-making team emphasized. To be honest, when there was a girl on stage, the first person people saw was a girl. But today, their gazes involuntarily landed on the silver-haired youth. There were girls in the audience, and they almost fell for him at first glance. Who is that? He's so handsome. I don't know. I've never seen him before. Such a handsome person has never been on a live broadcast? This doesn't make sense. What about his team? Do you recognize him from his clothes? I've never seen him before. Not only the female audience, but even the director couldn't help but give the young man a close-up. Not because of anything else, but because of the evil smile on his face. Give this guy more screen time. If this kid plays well, he will definitely become famous. The people backstage were still working. Fu Jiu had a lollipop in her mouth and one hand in her pocket. She led her team to the registration counter. The whole competition would be broadcasted live, and the game name would be shown to all the hero fans in the country. Both He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong followed her out of the country as agents, but they were not at ease. They were afraid that Fu Jiu couldn't accept failure, so before she came out, they said on the way, "Jiu, this competition is just for fun. The most important thing is to participate. Winning or losing isn't important. The most important thing is that you are happy." Chen Xiaodong's way of comforting people was always different from others. Young Master Qin has already accepted you. It doesn't matter even if you are not so addicted to games. People who have slept with you are always better at sleeping with you. Don't worry, no matter whether you win or lose, I will never tell Madam that you are participating for young Master Qin. Fu Jiu glanced at him and hooked his neck with her left hand. Lose? Your young master never loses, understand? He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong didn't say anything else. In their hearts, they only treated Fu Jiu as a child and asked him to go out and explore the world. They had seen those team members before. One blushed as soon as he saw them, and another blushed even when he had a cigarette in his mouth. The only girl was even more likable. But these 4 people, did they really understand the meaning of the esports selection contest? Besides, Spade Z was definitely not going to appear. He Honghua glanced at the entrance of the passageway again, and finally set her eyes on the young man who had caught everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Although He Honghua knew that they were just fooling around, she still couldn't help but clench her fists and whisper, "Joe, you can do it." He hoped that these children could win. Even if they could only win one match, at least they wouldn't have any regrets. Chapter 217. However, the Fu family's team members, who were also causing a sensation, frowned heavily when they saw Fu Jiao. What's going on? Why is this trash calling for a competition? He Honghua probably couldn't find anyone to join her team, so she found a few random players from somewhere and formed a team. Even if she wants to form a team, she doesn't need to find this trash. Those guys are not bad looking, but they are too arrogant. That wasn't enough. He purposely stood in front of Fu Jiao, raised his eyebrows, and smiled with obvious disdain. I didn't expect that someone would still dare to show off after what happened to him. It seems like he hasn't been beaten into submission yet. He must have forgotten how he begged for mercy in school. Otherwise, he would be scared out of his wits. Isn't that right, young Master Fu? As he spoke, he turned to look behind him. Fu Ximing was the prettiest among them, but his little face was still as arrogant as ever. He pretended to be cold as he glanced at Fu Jiao, as if he didn't care about anyone. Why are you talking so much to a layman? Go write your game name and get on the computer. Young Master Fu is right. There's really nothing to talk about with a layman. Apart from Fu Ximing, 2 of the contestants sent by the Fu family were poached from He Honghua's side. Now, it was one of them who answered. Yin Wuyao was a hot-tempered person, and he wanted to beat Fu Jiao up the moment he heard that. Fu Jiao raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. She looked at Fu Ximing and said in a light voice, "Beaten into submission? The one beaten into submission should be the classmate you sent, right? Why? Didn't your young Master Fu tell you how I slapped him in the face with the phone?" As soon as Fu Ximing heard that, his expression turned ugly. The more Fu Jiao behaved like this, the more embarrassed he felt when he recalled what happened that day. The other 3 didn't know what was going on. Then they heard Fu Ximing say coldly, "He can only show off for now. When the competition starts, you can fight him however you want. Now let's go." The Fu family had invited a reporter they were close to. Fu Ximing led his team to the registration area and was immediately surrounded by the media. These were all included in the content of the live broadcast. The difference was that this wasn't a stage, so there would be other interviews during the registration. Yin Wuyao looked at the backs of those people and was still unhappy. His thin lips twitched. Who is that kid? So arrogant? No wonder old Yao doesn't know. He's still young. When you were playing in the team, he was still drinking milk. Fu Jiao looked sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. How is it? Seeing such a person who deserves to be beaten up, will it motivate you? Yin Wuyao tilted his head. Very capable. Then go write your name. Fu Jiao walked over. The people on Fu Ximing's side saw this and mocked them. How many people would know a wild army's name in the game? Even if it was written, it would be placed at the end of the competition, and it wouldn't get any screen time. The esports selection contest was different from other competitions. Revealing the game name was also a unique attraction of the competition system. Who were the gods that they were familiar with in the game? Chapter 218. Many people had already stretched their necks, staring at the name and the corresponding contestant on the screen. That kind of excitement and agitation was indescribable. The people waiting to watch in the internet cafe clenched the can of Coke in their hands, just to see what the Almighty in their hearts looked like in real life. The most important thing was, Spade Z was very likely to be among them. A large part of the reason why there were no empty seats was because there were too many anti-fans, and every single one of them was waiting for Spade Z to show up. The media that the Fu family had invited also focused all their attention on Fu Ximing. Even manager Feng from the Qin Group Club was staring at those professional teams. Plus, there were too many people, so he didn't see Feng Shang. The main reason was that Feng Yi never thought that his brother, who liked to stay at home, would appear in the professional arena. After all, Feng Yi had wanted to bring him here before, but Feng Shang never came. He just watched the live broadcast. In other words, other than He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong, no one's eyes were on the He family army. No. There was one more person. He stood at the top of the arena, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders, and a pure white shirt inside. His deep eyes looked down at the ground, and his handsome and noble face was as cold as ever. And the people below couldn't see him. Only when the video was being broadcasted did the camera switch, and the face that could make people scream was transmitted to various live streaming platforms through the video. Almighty Qin! Oh my god, it's really Almighty Qin. I feel that Almighty Qin has become more handsome in just a few days. Is it my illusion? It's not your imagination. Almighty Qin is getting more handsome every day. But what is he looking at? I feel like he's looking at the registration. He must be looking at me. You know, Almighty Qin has high hopes for me. I'm drunk. Don't think too much, okay? Wait a minute. Almighty Qin is really looking at people. How is that possible? Why not? Almighty Qin and Spade Z are often together in the game. Is Almighty Qin looking for Spade Z in the crowd to see what he looks like in person? You mean live gay meetup? Looks like it. It was said that Qin Mo's existence was to witness the existence of the pinnacle of esports. In less than a minute, he had set off a wave of clicks. In just 3 minutes, the number of users on the platform had more than doubled. The media was also prepared to take advantage of this period to create another hot topic. As a result, most of the cameras were pointed at Fu Ximing's team. But at this moment, on the other side, which made people think that it was just a wild army, there was a sudden sound, and the whole screen exploded in red. Everyone couldn't help but look back in shock. On the screen was a player named North of Een Mountain, one of the top 5 players in the country. That's right, top 5. People who just started playing Hero might not recognize this name. But all the veteran players who had played for 3 years wanted to take another look at the screen in the middle of the game. After confirming that there was no mistake, the venue fell silent for a second, followed by a shout that came from the chest. Peking University. It really was Peking University. Damn, what should I do? My eyes are red. My favorite pro player is back. Luckily, I didn't give up. I knew that Peking University would definitely come back. Chapter 220. Chen Xiaodong was also shocked, and the shocked expression on his face was very obvious. So the person young master found, was this good? The people on Fu Ximing's side all opened their eyes wide. They never thought that there would be such a person in that wild army. Fu Ximing's expression changed, and then he said casually, "There's nothing strange about this. It's normal for He Honghua to spend money to find a master to shock the scene. As for the others, how can they be so good if they play with Fu Jiu?" However, just as Fu Ximing finished speaking, another light exploded on the He family army's side. Awarding you a slap of pleasure popular player, Glory Zone C, ranked top 7 in the country. Anyone who played Hero would know this ID. This person was not only well-equipped, but he was also a top-notch almighty in ranked matches. Almost in an instant, the sound of discussion swept through the entire arena like a tide. Holy *T. Who the hell is this He family army? This player's ranking is too amazing. More than amazing, they're practically poaching the entire almighty in the hero ranking. To be honest, I thought they were just a small amateur team. I didn't expect them to be so good. How come they didn't even dig up their background? Why didn't they even dig out their background? The media friends were almost crying. Okay. Our friends from the media are also close to crying. Alright. How could they have imagined that a temporary team that should not have appeared in front of the cameras would be able to shock the entire audience? Someone was even yelling, "Follow Big Brother, I'll beat you and take you to the skies." These words were all for Feng Shang. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. After all, they sometimes played ranked matches in the game, and they had fought against each other before. The other skills and dialogue were too different from his. Wasn't this the real cuteness? Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. His left hand, which was about to give out orders, suddenly stopped. This scene was something that almost no one had expected. First, the Almighty who disappeared 5 years ago came back. Then, it was the RMB Almighty on the super popular rankings. Both of them were from the same team, the He Family Army. This was a team that no one present had ever heard of before. However, the two people were indeed sitting there, and the computer screen was still emitting a faint blue light, which proved that this matter was true. This time, the director gave the order to change the position of the camera. The member of the Fu family, who was about to log into his account to show the video, stopped in mid-air with an ashen face. They were the most anticipated battle team, but their popularity couldn't compare to a wild team that had appeared out of nowhere. That kind of scene was undoubtedly the most awkward. His face was burning with pain. However, both the audience and the audience outside the arena no longer cared about the Fu's battle team. At this time, almost everyone had the same question in their minds. To be able to gather these two great experts, the captain of this team was definitely not simple. What would his online ID be? Clatter. The faint sound of typing could be heard. Chapter 221. H.E.I. Black. Her fair hands were on the keyboard, and her fingers moved at a surprisingly fast speed. Together with the handsome and evil silver hair of the young man, he was unspeakably cool. Before people could see how the young man was typing, 3 big words appeared on the big screen in the center. Spade Z. Instantly, He Honghua choked. Her mouth was wide open, and she couldn't say a word. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her, and even her black pupils were shocked. Chen Xiaodong's reaction was even more direct, and the support stick in his hand fell to the ground. Spade Z? His young master was Spade Z. That great god Spade Z who wiped out the whole server. How could this be? Young master was clearly a gamer who didn't even know how to choose a character. Although young master had been working hard recently to chase after young master Qin, locking himself in his room every day to play hero. But how could he be Spade Z? Chen Xiaodong glanced at the silver-haired young man sitting in front of the computer again, and even his fingers began to tremble. He couldn't tell what he was feeling at that moment. Excitement, shock, or disbelief. He couldn't believe it, but the audience gave the most direct reaction. Swoosh. Everyone in the audience stood up. Not only that, but the number of clicks on the online platform soared to the highest point because of the appearance of this game ID. The noise in the internet cafe almost blew the roof off. Everyone clenched the can of cola in their hands, and their eyes were shaking as they looked at the screen. Spade Z. That was Spade Z. Because the reaction was too big, the recorder had to stand up to maintain order. Quiet down, the game account hasn't been logged in yet. Everyone quiet down. How could they be quiet? That was their Big Spade. The rookie king Big Spade who swept the FC in Zone C. In fact, they didn't have much hope for the appearance of their Prince Charming. The media also said that the reason why Spade Z was so mysterious was probably because he was ugly and unpresentable. Those words weren't very nice. But now, just by looking at that face, passers-by would become his fans. Too handsome. Too young. Especially when the lollipop was in her mouth and her eyes were lowered as she typed, her thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under her eyelids. His messy silver hair matched with his black and white combat uniform didn't make him look decadent. Instead, he looked impeccably handsome. Ostentatious, arrogant, and noble. It was as if he could wipe out an entire army with a single move. This was simply making people's blood boil. Was that their Adonis, Spade Z? Everyone held their breath. The cameras were all aimed at the youngster's face. However, there was a beep. Game account login failed. There was only one sentence on the screen. Your account or password is incorrect. Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. Ha, what are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spade Z just to attract attention? Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate. These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen. Especially the haters, but if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fu Jiu differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spade Z. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutterer here? The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight? I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words, but when Manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fu Jiu's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Shiming stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him? Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Shiming's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spade Z? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spade Z is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Shiming's side. If that's the case, then Fu Jiu is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big Spade so easily? Shui Yaoyao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Shiming was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spade Z. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Shiming curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spade Z was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spade Z. When Fu Jiu logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Shiming stood up and glanced at Fu Jiu coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spade Z. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fu Jiu do? She could only be anxious. The smile on Fu Shiming's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Cur. Yin Wuyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back, he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? Yin Wuyao always said that Fu Jiu was a high school student, like an uncle. But now, he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fu Jiu were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, They heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, "CEO Xiao Qin, this is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Jiu, you can't be impulsive." The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared, because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Qin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fujiu looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Qin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Qin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fujiu smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Qin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Qin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spade Z out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Qin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Qin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Qin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Qin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fujiu moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then, she laughed in a low voice. "I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one." While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. "Damn! This person's hands are so fast." The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fujiu's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this?" Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. "It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool." "Network attack? What do you mean? You don't even know this? He is hacking the official website of Hero." "Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy *T. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spade Z, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world." "Hacking skills? Are you saying that this person is a hacker?" F***CK, brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this?" No matter how excited the crowd was, Fujiu's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. "Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed." The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fujio, not Fu Shiming. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spade Z and scolded Fujio shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fujio's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spade Z kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Shiming was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Shiming might be Spade Z. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol and believed in some baseless analysis. Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater? The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Shiming didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot and retrieving the registration information. He still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fujio, that sick loser, how could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Shiming's reaction. Even Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker. Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Jiu. That was her Jiu. In the midst of all the noise, Fujio stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Shiming's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word embarrassment wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spade Z felt that Fujio's actions were not only a slap to Fu Shiming's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information? She wanted to prove that she was Spade Z with just a form? Hee, do you think we're that easy to fool? The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade? Not here to defame him? We want the truth. When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Shiming saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white. Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window. Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment, Fujio laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. Fu Shiming, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account. Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete? The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The 2 shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fujio apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team in the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spade Z, There was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Ximing and Fu Jiu didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Ximing wanted to PK with the He family army. Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer and a has-been player are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete? That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates. The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all. Yes. Understood. The game screen officially turned on. Fu Jiu put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9? Awarding you a slap of pleasure and North of Een Mountain appeared out of nowhere and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still 2 people on the He family army side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Shan Bei turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god? Little stutterer? I'll kill you. Wu Yao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. Chapter 227. Feng Shang was about to vomit blood when he heard that. He was never angry, but his face turned cold. I can't accept your love. This was the first time he broke through his psychological barrier and shouted so loudly in public. Fu Jiu tilted her head and glanced at him. Feng Shang thought that his idol was going to praise him, and he blushed. Unexpectedly, his idol patted him on the shoulder and smiled handsomely. So anger can cure stuttering. Feng Shang. Okay, get ready for the second round. Under Fu Jiu's command, the He family army entered the game page. Fu Jiu only moved around for the whole 3 rounds of ranking PK. But was it really as simple as it looked? Anyone who had played the game before would know that the most difficult part of the game was the details. How to move around without being swept by others, and how to move around without affecting the teammates' performance. Only a master could do that. The commentators were all professional players of the Qin Corporation. From what they saw, they could tell that Fu Jiu was not a player who only knew how to leech experience. On the contrary, that young man didn't make a move, but once he made a move, even they couldn't be sure how good he was. But some fans were so arrogant that they firmly believed that Fu Jiu was only here to leech experience. After 1 round, there were only 4 teams left. Finally, a line of words appeared on the screen. He Family Army PK Fu Corporation Team. The members of the Fu family were indeed very good. After all, they had received professional training. No matter how amazing Fu Jiu's hacking skills were, they couldn't believe that the opponent was good at playing games. After all, they had been in the He Corporation for a long time. How could they not know what Fu Jiu was like? And even if the opponent really knew how to play games, how could he beat them with a new account? They were not like the previous teams, who had been hiding their skills for so long. It was not a problem to control the North of Een Mountain. Captain. Someone typed to Fu Ximing. From the beginning, all the attacks were initiated by the North of Een Mountain. Should we focus on him? Fu Ximing controlled the account of Spade Z, and sent back and forth. I'll block. You guys cooperate. Pay attention to defense. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Understood. Such a setup clearly showed that they didn't care about Fu Jiu's new account. They didn't even care about Shui Yao Yao. Fu Ximing had bought a lot of top-notch equipment for today's rookie selection contest. He raised his long saber and rushed in the direction of North of Een Mountain. Their plan was to kill North of Een Mountain, then turn around and give awarding you a slap pleasure a stunning skill. Because once they made their move, the first person to save North of Een Mountain was definitely awarding you a slap of pleasure. Someone else. In the He family army, Other than these two who were worth dealing with, the other two only knew how to move slowly. There was simply no need to guard against them. Wu Yao had also seen through his opponent's plan, and he immediately went into full defensive mode. You think you can stop me? Fu Ximing coldly laughed. Admit it. North of the Yin Mountain. You are already past your prime. You are just an old pro player who has lost all value. Even if you participate in the competition again, what can you do? Wu Yao had to admit, when he heard this, he did pause for a moment. Chapter 228. There was a clicking sound. A rhythmic tapping sound rose up. A clear and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Yao Yao, replenish Uncle Yin's blood. Yes. Shui Yao Yao's cooperation was also very good. This girl who was ignored by everyone tilted her mouse and released the potion in time. Fu Jiu's voice was still there. Feng Shang, assist me. Yes. This meant that Fu Jiu was not only controlling her own character, but she was also controlling the overall situation of the battle. Fu Ximing's people saw this and wanted to go back to deal with Shui Yao Yao. After all, if she healed north of Yin Mountain, the HP they just lost would come back. Who knew that before he could move his feet, a figure appeared in front of him. With the Jiu symbol on it, the white robe spread out, and it was as if the wind itself had arrived. The speed at which he rushed up was too fast. Really too fast. That person didn't even see clearly who the person in front of him was. Fu Jiu's slender hands danced on the black keyboard. With beautiful positioning and operation, a killing critical hit. The dazzling silver light filled the entire screen in an instant, creating a magnificent scene. That person who wanted to go back to defend saw his HP drop to the freezing point. He didn't even have the chance to heal himself before he fell down heavily. People who died in ranked matches couldn't be revived. That person looked at the black screen in front of him, threw the mouse in his hand, and arched his long legs forward unwillingly. How did he get hit just like that? However, to everyone's surprise, the young man's attack wasn't over yet. On the screen, when the silver light was about to end, Fu Jiu waved the mouse in her hand and turned back to bite the incoming character. She did another absolute sweep. Holy asterisk T. Yun Hu, did you see that? His hands didn't even stop. The shoutcaster was so excited that he grabbed the arm of his friend next to him. The other shoutcaster, Yun Hu, surprisingly didn't refute him. He looked at the screen in front of him seriously. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. There's more. There's more. This is unheard of. Fu Jiu had pure black headphones on her silver hair. Her eyes didn't even look at the keyboard. She only stared at the screen, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her left hand was on the keyboard, and her right hand was on the mouse. Generally speaking, the speed of an ordinary person's left hand would not be very fast. But to her, it made no difference whether she used her left hand or right hand. This was also the reason for this unprecedented chain of critical hits. Fu Ximing had no idea what was going on. He only saw a flash of silver light, and his HP dropped by more than half. He didn't expect to be greeted by another wave of silver light before he could even move. He manipulated Spade Z's account, but he didn't even lift his hand. There was a loud bang. Critical strike. Dominating the entire field. The silver light fell. Less than a minute after the start, two large words appeared on the screen. KO. Fu Jiu was still smiling, devilish, handsome, and unruly. However, it was already over. From the moment Fu Jiu put her hand on the keyboard, the ending was decided. The shock never stopped. The entire audience stared blankly at this scene. Not only in the live stream, but even the players in front of their screens were stunned. Their eyes and hearts were numb. Chapter 229. Such a scene seemed to be very familiar. The youngster didn't bring any equipment, and even used a new account, but he could destroy the entire team with one move. Looking at the past 10 years of competitions, only Almighty Qin could do that. This not only tested the player's skills, but also required the player to have a clear strategic layout in his mind. Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable professional player precisely because he had this kind of ability to control the entire field. Now, there was this kind of amazing scene. And it was done by a newbie. This was enough to shock everyone. In fact, even Wuxiao didn't expect their team leader to be this good. He looked at the silver light and the two characters that represented a complete victory on the screen. At that moment, the youngster's words came to Wuxiao's mind again. How is it enough to win an award? If you don't shock the esports world, why bother playing games? This time, not only the esports world of Jiang City was shocked, but even in the whole country, this kind of skill was top-notch. Especially that last roundhouse that showed how elegant it was to hit the enemy. It was really cool. Those anti-fans who were not convinced were all dumbfounded. That kind of technique was obviously Spade Z's most commonly used counterattack in dungeons. A person's identity could be faked, but the characteristics of this person's character couldn't be erased. And there were people who studied Spade Z's fighting style. If one didn't have a certain level of hand speed, they couldn't imitate it at all. They didn't know how to describe their inner feelings. They only felt the pain on their faces, and that kind of awkwardness was indescribable. Fu Ximing was in a daze the whole time. He was still looking at the screen where the silver light hadn't faded. He couldn't believe that they had been wiped out. Usually, every classic move of the winning side would be replayed on the big screen. This was something that happened in every single competition. However, only this time, when the ultimate move was replayed, even the commentator didn't come back to his senses. He just sat there with his eyes wide open. Whoosh! The whole stadium was filled with whistles. Many people stood up directly, waving their arms and hitting their support sticks loudly. Fu Ximing's face was unprecedentedly pale, without a trace of blood. He was still logged into his Spade Z account on the screen. That gray screen with this ID was very glaring. Everyone knew that a large part of the reason why Spade Z was liked by so many people was because he had never lost in the game. 99 consecutive wins, and as long as he played, he would get the first kill. And it was because of this record that he was so popular. But now, this godly ID with countless glory was in Fu Ximing's hands, and he didn't even have the power to fight back. In the end, it was already clear who was the real one. But it wasn't over yet. Chapter 230. After hearing this sentence, the uproar at the scene almost exploded. The number of clicks on all major online platforms broke 100 million. Everyone was leaving comments in the comments section. Even the platform technicians had never seen such a fast rate of comments. They were even worried that the network would go down. Cool. This is my big spade. I can KO you with a new account. I won't talk if I can do it. Where's the commentator? Play the replay and explain. The commentator has also become my big spades fangirl. I just want to ask you, who else is there? Who else is there? Open your eyes wide, those who are slandering my big spade. I've been waiting in front of the computer for a long time. As a middle-aged uncle, let me give you a scientific explanation. Only my big spade's hand speed can turn around and bite you. Do you understand? Fu Ximing, return my big spade's account. If you don't return it, I'll show you the strength of us hackers. These comments would appear on the live screen at the same time for better interaction online and offline. When the audience saw this, they were all very excited. Middle-aged uncle also likes my big spade? My big spade likes both men and women. He said they are hackers. I don't care. Anyway, return our big spade's account. Return it. In an instant, all the Spade fans in the audience were asking Fu Ximing to return the account. The Fu family's team couldn't even sit still when they were in such an embarrassing situation. Fu Ximing himself clenched his fists, and his face turned white and then purple. How could the media let go of such a scene? Of course, they would capture it immediately. Fu Ximing hurriedly used his hands to block, but the more he did so, the more embarrassing the scene became. Can't you have some manners? Why did you let him return the account to you? Some anti-fans couldn't accept this result. Because once they admitted that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, their words would become knives stabbing themselves. They still wanted to quibble, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were suppressed. Shut up. Return the account. Don't think that a true Spade fan is easy to bully. When it's time to be tough, you won't be careless. One more word and I'll throw you out. But at this moment, Fu Jiu looked towards the audience and laughed. Her seductive skills and voice made people feel like they were in their bones. I don't need him to return it. I'll take it back myself. As she spoke, her finger moved, and an invisible dialog box appeared on the computer screen. She pressed the enter key. The machine in front of Fu Ximing seemed to be controlled by something invisible, and it began to jump with code that no one could understand. F***CK. While playing games, he could even plant a virus in the opponent. Let me ask you, how did you do it? I was only focused on Big Spade's ultimate move. Gosh. I request the officials to give me a super slow replay. Chapter 231. Fu Ximing's face was almost swollen. The shoutcaster, Yun Hu, had also come from the military courtyard. When he saw this, he couldn't suppress his instincts. He sneered into the microphone. I don't think I need to explain this part. The person who spent money to steal someone's account can leave now that he has been exposed. When the Fu family's team members heard this, not only their expressions, but even their movements were stiff. Out of so many esports competitions, they were the only team that was kicked out by the organizer. Not only that, such a large-scale esports live broadcast must have been watched by all the other teams, which meant that they had lost face all over the country. In the future, not only in Jiang City, but also in other cities, this would be their lifelong shame. The audience in the stadium would not give them face at all. If they only lost, they would get the respect of the loser. But Fu Ximing ignored the rules and thought that he was powerful. Not only did he steal someone else's account, but he also incited the media to impersonate them. The reason why gamers loved esports so much was that they could get fairness in Hero that they couldn't get in real life. In the past, background didn't matter here. As long as you were skilled enough, you could stand out. But in recent years in the esports circle, there were some people who relied on their good looks to find others to play for them, or they could become famous just because they were rich. This made some people feel discouraged. Fu Ximing's blatant actions had completely touched the bottom line. Many real Spade Z fans were worried about Fu Jiao in front of their computers, afraid that the young man couldn't prove himself. But in the end, the young man not only proved himself. It also proved one thing. As long as you had the ability, you wouldn't be afraid of rumors. Nobody knew when it started, but when people saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. They didn't know when it started, but when they saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. No one needed to say which team the champion would belong to. The three big words, He Family Army, dominated the 10 screens in the stadium, with Fu Jiao's beautiful and fair face and the slow-motion playback of her ultimate moves. No matter how many times they watched it, it was still too handsome. In the audience, He Honghua's round face was already covered in tears. She covered her mouth with her hands, afraid that she would cry. She had never told anyone about how she had led her life. Sometimes, she was so tired that she wanted to divorce Fu Zhongyi. In this world, there are too many people who will respect you because you have enough money, power and culture. He doesn't care what you did. On the same occasion, she appeared with the three. She was just a village girl. She deserved to be robbed by that man. That third was a fairy who was praised by others, who asked her to not be as good-looking as him, and to have such a figure. He Honghua didn't like money, but she couldn't live without it. What about her Jiao? Once she filed for divorce, the company would lose her. What would happen to her Jiao in the future? She couldn't swallow her anger. He had to earn it back. However, all of her team members had been poached away at the last minute. She had been deserted by her friends and family, and she had been slandered by the public. Everyone wanted to step on her and make her completely bankrupt. He had really been discouraged before. In such a dark night, she had to travel from city to city to beg for help. She really wanted to cry. Even when the He family army appeared, she still thought that she would just treat it as her Jiao's happiness. But he had won. Chapter 232. He Honghua didn't know how to describe her feelings. She just looked at the tall and slender figure on the field with red eyes. In a mother's mind, the greatest happiness for her child was to be recognized. The background music of Hero sounded. All the members of the He family army stood up. Every one of them had very bright eyes. We have to admit that sometimes there was a kind of handsomeness that had nothing to do with appearance. It was a kind of aura that emanated from the inside out. 4 people of different heights, wearing the same uniform, stood side by side. The youngster was in the lead, and behind them were rows of glowing computer screens. All the cameras were aimed at one direction. The captain of the He family army, Fu Jiu. Just as some people expected, this youngster was going to be popular. The esports selection contest organized by the Qin Group was broadcasted nationwide. It wasn't over yet. Over there were reporters asking questions at the All-Star press conference. The question was from the ever-victorious team that suppressed the Supreme Alliance last year, the Xiongnan team. Almighty Xiao, I don't know if you paid attention to the selection contest organized by the Qin Group. The person called Almighty Xiao sat calmly. How can I pay attention when I'm here? Reporter. There's no way to continue this topic. I heard that there's a player called Spade Z over there. He destroyed the whole field as soon as he appeared. The man raised his eyebrows. There's such a thing? It's being broadcasted on all the online platforms. The reporter was already excited when he said this. He wanted to grab some news. After all, everyone knew that Xiongnan and the Supreme Alliance would have a tough battle in the national competition soon. If he could grab some news at this time and use it as a gimmick, it would definitely be a hit. The man just glanced at the reporter and then, "Oh, just an O? Tell me what you're feeling right now." The agent standing behind the man couldn't stand it anymore. He smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. "Xiao Jing, you can tell me more about your feelings." Feelings? Xiao Jing thought about it seriously and said, "Please broadcast this kind of esports competition on TV. I don't like the internet." Reporter. You, an esports god, don't like the internet. I heard that Almighty Qin appreciates this Spade Z very much. The reporter saw that Xiao Jing was about to leave, so he had to use his big move. As expected, the man walked back, his face serious. Tell me in detail, how did Qin Mo appreciate this newcomer? Reporter. Xiaoda, this is a press conference, not a small talk. You're paying so much attention to Almighty Qin, aren't you secretly in love with him? The people from the other teams saw it too. There were many players from the top 4 in the country. This Spade Z is not bad. Why don't you say that it's because his opponents are too weak? There will always be some loopholes in his attacks. It's just that his opponents didn't notice them. Anyway, we'll meet him in the national competition. Let's show him what really sports is like then. Of course, regardless of what was going on in the outside world, the golden trophy that symbolized first place was already in Fu Jiu's hands. Regardless of whether they were professional or non-professional, all of the hero fans were watching this scene through the live stream. Chapter 233. In the beginning, some people were wondering why the young man wanted to go there. But when they came back to their senses, they remembered that Almighty Qin was there. What was going on? In the distance, Qin Mo was wearing a pure black uniform. He was standing on 10 steps, and when he saw the young man walking towards him, his long and narrow eyes became more and more enchanting. His expression was still indifferent. Even now, he only raised his eyebrows slightly, full of an aura of abstinence. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Not only the audience, but even the judges were stunned. Because they never thought that the story would develop like this. What did the young man want to do by walking in front of Almighty Qin like this? In that instant, all the cameras shifted their positions and focused on the two of them. Secretary Liang, who was nervous, was also caught in the frame. He just wanted to pull young Master Jiu over and ask him what he wanted to do by doing this at this time. Didn't he know that there were cameras around? What if someone found out that our boss Qin might be gay? Chen Xiaodong basically had the same idea as Secretary Liang. He still hadn't forgotten why his young master played online games. It was all because of young Master Qin. Now, he was even more certain of this idea. However, neither Fu Jiu nor Qin Mo cared about other people's opinions. The two of them were originally luminous, and when they walked together, the brilliance would be multiplied by 10 times. The young man had a slight smile on his face. He was handsome and attractive, and even through the screen, one could feel his youthful aura. His side profile was so clean that even the tiny hairs could be seen on the camera. What was different from the young man was the noble and domineering aura that Almighty Qin exuded. Two people. One on the stage. The other below. Standing on the steps in the middle. Suddenly, it was as if all the lights ran into the young man's eyes, like a broken diamond, shining beautifully. Because he was too handsome. When such a scene appeared on the screen in the form of a picture, people only felt that they were looking at a beautiful comic script. Fu Jiu was still walking forward with a smile. The judges were wondering if Boss Qin would give the young man a look and let him experience it himself. He didn't expect this. Just as Fu Jiu reached the last step, Qin Mo suddenly reached out his hand and pulled the youngster up. Fu Jiu didn't hesitate. She took the force and leaned forward to smile. Her thin lips moved close to Qin Mo's left ear, and her voice was very melodious. Brother Mo, you don't have to come down from the altar. I can just come up. How can I be worthy of you if I don't have the ability to wipe out the entire team? What he said made people think too much. Chen Xiaodong covered his eyes when he saw the scene. Young master, what exactly do you want? You're flirting with Almighty Qin in front of the entire nation. Shui Yaoyao's heart trembled. She looked to her left, then to her right. The audience's jaws dropped. Your Highness Jiu, did you really not see the frown on Almighty Qin's face when you got close to his ear? The two commentators were also speechless. They had never seen their captain being flirted with like this before. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.